Wide receiver, handful of notable names, powerful names, guys that are a little bit older, though, and have a little bit of context to them. The report is out there. James Rappian put this out that T. Higgins is going to get franchise tagged. He has not yet, but that is sort of the report of what we heard earlier this week. So that, to me, is the direction that it feels like we're going. But until that happens, he's scheduled to be a free agent. So he's going to be at the very top of the market. He is our number one ranked free agent that we have of all positions over at PFF.com. You guys can go see all of those free agent rankings. Higgins, Chris Godwin, coming off the knee injury, but still, man, just one of the best and most steady, consistent wide receivers in the game today. Stefon Diggs, who's also coming off an ACL tear. Amari Cooper, who was traded to the Bills, but they knew that it might be a one-year rental thing for him. I'm curious if he ends up going back to Buffalo or not. Keenan Allen with the Bears, DeAndre Hopkins with the Chiefs, Marquise Brown with the Chiefs as well, Darius Slayton, Deontay Johnson, Mike Williams. Dalton, who do you want to point out here from this group?
Yeah, I'm curious after the injury that he suffered, I believe it was in Week 8 this year, what Stefon Diggs has left in the tank. Because even in his time, the short time with the Texans, a 79.7 receiving grade, which is solid, 1.84 yards per route run, and the second highest rate of routes run from the slot in his career. And I think that's what you're talking about now, is a movable or even a slot weapon in an offense, and a guy who can still pick up first downs, right? He's not as explosive as he used to be. His missed tackles force rate after the catch was the lowest of his career this past year, but I think there's still something there as long as he's healthy, right? And I think his numbers, all those numbers I just showed you, are they at his career averages? They're maybe a little bit below, but there's still a productive player in there, if you're Stefon Diggs. I'm curious if Houston has the money or wants to keep him, if they feel good about where his knee is progressing, right? But I think he's at least something between a wide receiver 2 or a really good third option in a good offense, in an offense, for a contender, especially if they want a guy who in the slot can just pick up first downs in big spots. Stefon Diggs can still win one-on-one in tight spaces. He's just not as explosive as he used to be, but the question is going to be the injury. If you can guarantee he's going to come back 100% healthy, I think he's absolutely still going to have a good market in free agency, especially for a contending team that needs a receiver.
Yeah, I'm not ready to write off Stefon Diggs quite yet, and I even think that him going back to the Houston Texans does make a lot of sense for that team, especially because you have Nico Collins. You don't have to worry about Diggs getting fully back to health and being like a wide receiver 1 like he has been, with Minnesota and when he was with Buffalo. Like, you don't have to worry about that. You can allow him to be that wide receiver 2 for you. Shoot, you can even still draft a wide receiver in this draft if you want to maybe push that wide receiver 2 spot. So I actually do think that spot makes sense. I think it's more likely than not that Chris Godwin goes back to the Buccaneers, because they love him. As somebody who I covered the Buccaneers before I worked at PFF, and so I've got some connections there. I talked to some people there. They love him, man. And he loves Tampa. Him and his family love the Tampa Bay area. It's been home for him. I know that they've talked a lot about that. And, of course, money talks. I have to believe that Tampa will be pretty competitive with their offer to Chris Godwin, even with him coming off of the knee injury. The only way, if all things are equal, like let's just say he's deciding between, the Buccaneers, the New England Patriots. I don't know who's another team that would really want a guy like Chris Godwin.
Maybe a Washington, the Commanders.
Washington, okay, one of those teams. If it's the same deal, whatever that number is between all three teams, I think he goes back to Tampa. But if there's a team that's willing to give him like $3-4 million over whatever market asking is for him, then you start thinking about moving on, because that's a lot of zeros, that's a lot of commas, that's a lot of millions, especially coming off of an injury, and you just never know how your body's totally going to respond to that. So if all things are equal, I do think he's coming back to Tampa, but if somebody really believes in the future of Chris Godwin, I could see him going elsewhere. I think a spot like Washington does make sense. It's a really good call out. As for the rest of them, I think Amari was a good addition to the Bills. I wonder what he would sign for, because I would like to see him back in Buffalo. That would be nice. Keenan Allen going back to Chicago, I think that would be an ideal situation for him with Ben Johnson now this time around. Now you kind of just got to get to the bottom of how much you think he has left in the tank, and I think that's then the question for a couple of these other veterans. But yeah, I think that's probably how I would look about this free agency class. The one that's probably the most intriguing to me is Darius Slayton, because I do feel as though Slayton has gotten a lot better. I think he's a good vertical threat, and I think he's even rounded out his game pretty well over the last couple of years. there just really hasn't been the consistency at quarterback in New York to showcase that all the time. So Darius Slayton's actually kind of the one that, even over some of those other veterans, like over DeAndre Hopkins or a Keenan Allen or a Marquise Brown, like I'd probably take a flyer on Darius Slayton above those other guys. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's a funny one because he's never been in an ideal situation with a good quarterback, right? So I think you wonder, could he try to go somewhere with a more veteran quarterback, or at least a better one than the Giants have, and go, okay, this guy actually is going to have some success here? You mentioned as a vertical threat. I almost wonder, because a couple of these guys the Chiefs are losing, could a team like Kansas City look at Slayton and go, okay, he kind of fits in here. We have Rashee Rice, we have Xavier Worthy, but to add another vertical outside threat like Slayton, like they were looking for from Hollywood Brown, maybe Slayton would actually give them that over a full season. Obviously Brown had the injuries this year, but no, I think he is an intriguing option, and he would really benefit from going to just any better quarterback situation than he's had really his entire career with the Giants.
Yep, I agree. Maybe a team like the Chargers as well. Just looking at a couple of different teams like Arizona. Arizona's intriguing because you got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Michael Wilson, but you could also now have a guy who takes the top off the defense if you get a guy like Darius Slayton. So he's probably the most intriguing wide receiver. Not the top name, but the guy who I'm watching the most. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.